Hi, y'all. Welcome back to the Playmakers Corner podcast. I am one of your hosts for this episode, Kodey Stoffer.
I'm your other co-host here, Simon Voyanos, aka Coach V.
And I'm the third and final co-host for this episode, Gideon Agner.
And we are going to continue our Colorado football culture series that has been nothing but bangers, honestly. So if you've not been listening to those, make sure to double back where we've talked about plenty of topics such as college football in Colorado, women's and girls flag football in Colorado, classification bias, as well as 7v7 culture, and so many more topics in between and coming up that we feel are necessary to discuss on how to advance Colorado and what issues need to be addressed in order for Colorado as a state to be taken more seriously in the realm of football. That has been the vision on how to advance Colorado football for us since the beginning, and this is one of the biggest ones here. This one is going to have probably the most backlash out of any episode, if I had to guess, and it's going to be backlash that we've heard once, twice, 3, 4, 5 million times before, and nothing has changed since we've brought it up. So, I mean, some little things have changed, and we'll talk about that a little bit, but it's, overall, 5A mediocrity is on the docket for today. Look, I played all 4 years of my high school career in 5A. Simon has experience with playing in 5A, and, we've all watched mediocre 5A football. And so I think that it's a very bad reflection on the state, and something has to change if Colorado is going to be taken more seriously, and it's going to have to, it's going to have to be 5A that addresses it. We've talked about other classifications and why they're more enticing to track, but, I think that for 5A, something's got to give here. And, to kind of start us off here, I think that the really easy one to talk about is the lack of success against big-time out-of-state programs. Now, the main emphasis here that I want to kind of put in bold and underline is big-time out-of-state programs. As in, that's cool that XYZ and programs have these trips to Cali and these trips to Florida and whatnot. But, and it's cool to be competitive, but we should win if we want to be taken more seriously. And I think that, obviously there's some programs that are doing more for that than others, but it's just crazy to me that the first two examples I think of when I think of schools playing great out-of-state programs is Cherry Creek, who is not really a part of this topic on the mediocre side, by the way. More on that later. And, I think of Valor's blowout loss to that Arizona squad last year in the 2022 season, and Creek playing, one of the top team in Ohio, as well as playing Chandler the year before. And we need more than those two teams to be trying to compete against those teams, and we need to be winning those games anyway. Simon, obviously, having grown up in Texas, you have, that out-of-state view on it. What is kind of your take on Colorado's lack of success against big-time out-of-state programs, and how that influences both Colorado football culture within the state and the perspective of Colorado football from outside the state?
Yeah, so for Colorado high school football culture to grow and gain respect and for more players to get recruited, you have to start beating teams from out of state who have these athletes who are highly touted and whatnot. That's just what it comes down to. Like we said, Valor and Creek obviously do what they can. They always play some pretty good schools out of state and they compete with them. But also, it would be really nice to win those games because it's important. Nobody else is really playing like those top tier teams from out of state, and that's definitely a little, it's a little concerning because then that puts a lot of pressure on Valor and Creek to really carry Colorado when it comes to our self-respect with football and all of that great stuff. And Creek, I think, had the ability to beat Chandler and to beat that team from Ohio these last 2 years, but it's also tough to do it with a quarterback carousel. Now, I think with it probably being the Brady Vodka era and that being very much in place here, I think it could happen. I think they can beat one of those teams without being big. Will that be enough? No. It won't. You need more. You need at least 15 or 20 other schools to be playing pretty solid programs. How come more teams aren't going to Utah or Arizona to play those schools, right? And that's just an issue. It's just an issue. And honestly, we need to beat teams so that we could get enough respect for teams to come into our house, to come into Colorado and play us here. Because that'll also cut down travel time and costs and all that great stuff. And, like I said, more opportunities for Colorado football. And so, honestly, there's just no way for Colorado football to continue to progress without us showing that we could beat some top dogs around the country. There's just no feasible way. The talent could continue to get better, but we're never going to earn that respect and move up as more than a flyover state if we can't do that. Plain and simple. And so I'm looking to our 5A programs, who are our biggest programs, have some of the best facilities in the state, and they just haven't done enough. Honestly, they just haven't done enough to progress that, because, I could look at some of these smaller classifications and be like, well, they just might not have the money to be able to go travel out of state and continue to do that, or they can't afford to, well, I guess that's still the money, but they can't afford to get all their players to another, state or whatever and play a team, at least competitively. Or, they might not be on the same talent level because of, the training facilities and whatnot, that being an issue. And so I'm looking at the 5A schools and I'm like, how come you haven't done more for Colorado football? Other than complain that, oh, it's just Creek and Valor. Like, that's really all you do in my eyes sometimes. And it really pisses me off. And I'm not censoring that out. But, you got to carry your weight eventually. And you got to play good schools. You got to go travel. Go play teams in Arizona. Go play teams in Utah. Go play teams in Kansas, and go beat them by a lot. I'd rather you play those teams, before your league play than play each other at this point. Because it's like, well, what's the point? Really, what's the point? You want to get more recruiting and stuff for your athletes, get them sharp and whatnot, go play the best from other states. You'll see some of these teams later in the playoffs, so really, what's the point? Go get different film for your athletes and play, teams from different states. And for some coaches, they don't take that as seriously. Or they make too many excuses when it comes to, oh, we don't have the money. You're telling me your 2,000 student school doesn't have the money? Bro, that's not a good enough excuse. Gideon, what do you think about all this?
I mean, I honestly echo everything that you say there. And I'm going to bring in an example of two programs that I think are doing the right thing. And that's Timnath and Wellington. Do you guys, you guys know, but those listening, Timnath and Wellington are both going to Florida to play preseason games. They're both traveling their entire teams to Florida to play some preseason games.
And they're not private schools.
No, those are brand spanking new public schools. Those are schools that are invested in making their programs successful as soon as possible. These are programs that care. If you can say anything about Timnath and Wellington, yeah, they didn't make the playoffs last year. Well, yeah, it's their first year as schools in 60 years. But guess what? They're both actively working to get better. And if two 2A schools, one of which went winless last year, and one of which was under 5, and the other was under 500, are willing to go to Florida to actively improve their craft, I don't see a reason that a Regis Jesuit couldn't. I don't see a reason why a lot of these, why a Ralston Valley can't do that. Even like a Fossil Ridge or a Fort Collins or a Pooter. I love you guys, but we're close enough to other states that we can go and play some of their elite programs, even if it's just Wyoming. Like, Wyoming's got those big country boys. We could probably afford the 40 minutes up to Laramie. Like, and then you're looking at, like, the schools in the state that do play schools from other states. That's because they're the only close schools, like Moffat County or Lamar. And those schools, I mean, you couldn't fully say that they have a choice in, like, what competition they're able to play. And so, yeah, when it comes down to it, I don't see a reason why, especially the private schools, can't do that. Like, if you're a public 5A, if you're North Glen, I completely understand if you can't afford to go to Utah or go to Arizona or Florida or Texas. But if you are a private 5A school, you have no excuse at all. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, and I think that, just to kind of jump in here, I think that it's crazy because Arizona is a state that has 5 programs in the top 100 of high school football rankings, and they are just basically down I-25. Like, that's maybe a day bus trip. If you need to get a plane trip, I think that's very swingable and manageable. So you have a ton of programs there that you can test. And Utah, I want to say, has 3 teams in the top 100. So it's like the competition doesn't have to be super duper far. Those are pretty reasonably close, I would say, and definitely something that we could push ourselves to do. And for the private schools that are doing it, like Regis, for example, they lost a 6-point game to Oaks Christian, right, last year. That's a team from California. That's it. That's their only out-of-state scheduled game. You know what I mean? And Valor, I mean, they got Liberty to come here, but Liberty's going to make them drive out if they're going to 50-7 drub them. You know what I mean? Like, we still need these teams to win these football games to be taken seriously. Not only do we need to schedule them, first off, we need to win these games. And Creek, I mean, it just makes us look bad as a state if the only team we have in the top 100 is Cherry Creek. That's the only team we have in the top 100, and they're at 81. So that's pretty, well, relatively speaking, easy to fall out of, right? And so if we want to be taken more seriously, not only do we need to schedule more games, we need to win more games, and we need to have, like, multiple teams up in here. I'm not saying that we need as many as Texas or, like, Florida or Cali, but we should have as many as Utah and Arizona, I think. We should have, like, 3 teams in this top 100 if we're going to be taken seriously. That burden does fall on 5A, and they're not doing it, and that's part of the reason why we're a flyover state.
They have the most money to do it, and they choose not to. Some of them do. So that's going to hurt us. And until they do, and until we start winning games, Colorado will be where we are, and that will be that from now on here. And it's not enough to just schedule one game. It starts with scheduling one game, but ideally, you should really probably be playing 2 or 3 games out of state, That's just my opinion coming from Texas, so there you go there. But let's go ahead and keep this thing moving here, though, and let's talk about private schools here. Because I think the 5A private schools here in-state could always do a little bit more. They can afford to travel more. They can afford to do all of that stuff here. And let's just keep it a buck here. There's a pretty significant lack of dominance from multiple private schools. Obviously, you have Valor Christian. They've done their thing. They haven't won in a while. Without a McCaffrey, they haven't won. But, I truly think with where they're at with McGatlin and whatnot, they'll win pretty soon here. They'll win probably in the next 2 or 3 seasons, winning state, that is. And so Valor is pretty much off the hook at this point. I feel like they've done all the right things. They have great facilities. They play out of state schools. They really push their athletes too, which is huge. You know, they always have so many of them going D1 and getting next level opportunities. That's big time. Valor is doing it right. You know, and that's not something we're going to say all the time. You know, so there you go there. But when it comes to other private schools in 5A, we have an issue, right, Kodey?
No, absolutely. I mean, I brought it up. And, you know, Regis, we've had plenty of players that are top 5 candidates or are top 5 players from there within the state. You know, so the talent is there. But something is missing here when beating Valor in week 1 is your Super Bowl. Is that unfair to say here? I mean,
yeah, you need to be winning state,
and
they need to be winning state.
Yeah, and you know, Regis has been in that spot kind of a lot, honestly, which is not great. And you know, I think it's cool that a lot of public schools are like able to compete, but I think that there still needs to be. I mean, if you're getting to recruit these players a little bit and, you know, you have guys from, like, Denver, and Regis is, like, off of Parker Road in Arapahoe. Like, it is, like, it's in Aurora, but it's, like, right in between, like, Centennial, Aurora, Parker, in that weird kind of, like, liminal space, honestly. And I think that they do have to do better, and I think that's one of the big ones that we're talking about here when talking about schools like that. And then Mullen, obviously, I mean, that's one of the most underachieving programs, period, since Dave Logan left there. I mean, those are the schools like Mullen should be a perennial powerhouse. Regis should be contending for state every year. Valor should, like, games between those 3 schools should be a big deal, I believe. A bigger deal than they feel like. Now, you know, it was cool to watch the Valor Regis game and see Regis get a win, but until it changes in the postseason, which for those teams should be the season that actually matters, it's hard to really buy into it.
Go ahead, Gideon. Did you have something you wanted to add on here?
Oh, well, I was about to... Well, right now I'm looking at some of the top programs in the state, and I'm looking at the 5A teams. And, I mean, say what you will about Pine Creek, but last season their opening game was at Las Vegas High School in Nevada, and they whooped their butts 43-3. And that's the type of thing that we need to be seeing in order... Like, Pine Creek is, yeah, they're a public school. So like I'm not fully sure what these private schools like think they're getting away with by not doing that. If Pine Creek is able to go to Las Vegas and win like that, I don't see why Regis can't. I don't see why Mullen can't at least schedule that game. Long story short.
Yeah, no. I mean, absolutely. I mean, look, I'm looking at Mullen and I'm looking at Regis and I'm like, how are you not like a top 100 team in the country? Or, you know, maybe on the cusp, maybe not top 100, but how are you not like at least a top 200 or 300 team in the country? How are you not, you know, going to semis every year or going to state every year? I don't understand how you have all those facilities and how you could pretty much openly recruit just like any other 5A school. I'm just going to be honest. Everyone talks about like, oh, well, they recruit so we can't compete with them. Hey, idiot, can't you do the same thing? Like, I don't understand how. Plus, transferring rules are a lot more lax when it comes to private schools. So it's just mediocrity. You need to do better. That's it. You really need to be winning at least 10 games, and that should be your worst season.
Yeah, and I do have, like, 150%, like, that. You should, if you're Mullen, going 5-6 should not be acceptable.
It should be fireable almost.
Depending on the year.
Not almost. Like, definitely, unless you're just obliterated by injuries at every position. That's insane.
Yeah.
And watching them play against Legacy last season was embarrassing. That was an embarrassing game to watch. Like, oh my gosh. It looked like they rolled out the JV squad.
Oh, and in terms of... Because we did talk about Mullen not traveling. They did travel to Santa Margarita in California, but then they lost 63-6.
Well, that's a good... Shout out Beckham Kritza. They're over there. I mean, that's a high-key top 20 or 30 program in the country, in my opinion. As far as public schools go, I guess. But I like it, though. I still respect it, though.
Yeah, and then Regis, I'm just going to take a... Oh, yeah, and then Regis did travel to Oaks Christian in Westlake and lost 34-28. But that's a game you got to win.
Yeah. I mean, plain and simple, that's it. The private schools got to do better. Valor, I think, is going to be just fine. Really trust this coaching staff. Kodey, I think you agree on that as well. And I think they're not going to get whooped by Liberty again. I think that was, a culmination of a couple things there. But they'll be fine. And I'm sure they're going to get back to where they're at. But it can't just be Valor, carrying the private schools in 5A. And we're talking about money, right? And I feel like those three schools have plenty of money, and so there's a lot more responsibility on them to compete and do better and win and, uphold Colorado football and show what we're really about, honestly. And for them to not is just not good enough, right now.
Yeah, like, as much as I hate recruiting, like, personally, I really don't like it. But if that is something that is allowed and you're not taking full advantage of it, and like if you're one of those private schools and you're somehow not doing that, I don't see that as you're simply not doing a good job. As long as that's something that you're able to do.
Well, recruiting isn't allowed.
It's not allowed, but if you both point a finger at each other like, hey, they're recruiting, the people who are pointing the fingers are only mad because they didn't get the recruit. Like, because they've probably had the exact same conversation. I mean, we know because especially the year that we were really covering a lot of middle school ball, and even through the league that I run, I've talked to kids that are talking about being recruited by different schools at Highlands Ranch for Highlands Ranch talent. Like, everyone literally does it. The only people that get mad are the people who the recruits don't choose their school. And instead of looking within themselves on why did they choose to go there instead of here, what can we do to build a better culture to have this caliber of player, they'd rather just cry about it.
Well, when I say recruiting, that's what I'm talking about. It's like going down to like middle school or grabbing some guy at a struggling school in Nebraska type of thing.
Yes. Well, we could definitely do that. And I would probably encourage some of these private schools to do more of that. But I don't think they care that much at this point, or they would, right?
Yeah. It reads more as... what's the word? It reads more as complacency to me. Like, oh, well, no matter what we do, we're not gonna get past those top 4 programs. No need to try, type of thing.
For sure. But don't have too much more to say here. Do we want to move on to the next segment here, talking about some of these 5A schools and their playing styles?
Oh, you know it.
All right. Well, Kodey, I want you to answer this one first here, because I know you played 5A football.
I'm literally rolling up the sleeves right now.
Oh, I know.
I'm rolling up the sleeves.
Oh, I know. But you played 5A football for Arapahoe. Let's talk about the lack of modern schemes on the 5A level, especially not just compared to other states, but compared in-state with some of these other classifications that have way more programs to run way more modernized systems compared to 5A teams. Go ahead, Kodey.
All right. Riddle me this, Batman. How, since I have graduated in 2017, yeah, I'm old. It's been 6 years. 6 years, my alma mater, Arapahoe High School, has had 4 head coaches since then. My coach, Mike Campbell, Rod Sherman, who's out in Orange County, I want to say, former Valor coach, Coach Joe New, who's more of a defensive guy. Lots of respect for him, and make sure to check out Fairview. Love everything that they're doing for football, both in and out of state. And then, most recently, the NFL coach, I should say the former NFL player, I should say, who's now in charge of Arapahoe here. And I want to say it's Tyler Brayton or something like that. Through all of this time, through all of these changes, they somehow run the exact same offense. How? How is that even possible? How is that even possible to run the exact same I-form, 20 carries? This team, my alma mater, didn't even average 20 points per game last season. They didn't even average 20 points per game. And they were one of... They had a bye. They had a bye for the playoffs. That's insane. They had a home... Well, should have been a technically home playoff game. That's ridiculous, honestly. And the fact that it works is a reflection of the rest of 5A, man. Like, holy cow, there's teams still running the wing T. I was talking to one of my coworkers who's like a gazillion years old, talking about running wishbone wing T stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I saw that 2 weeks ago at a game. That's terrible. And it comes from like I feel like a lot of coaches don't like trust their players. You got to invest into them, homeboy. Like, look at, like Simon literally said, other classifications like 1A through 4A where they are running these concepts. Kids aren't just stupid. You have to actually invest into them if you want something to come from it, right? And they're just not willing to do that. They're comfortable in their job. They're they are not willing to change with the game of football, which makes me question their pride for football. Like, as a sport, it really makes me question that, how invested they are. No. They would rather just be like, I've been doing this forever. This has worked for 30 years and it's going to work next year. What? Like, bro, get with the times. Especially, we see the offenses that are way more like chameleon-esque and can do multiple things are the ones that at least get to knock at Creek and Valor's door. You know what I mean? And I don't care if you beat them in the regular season. I don't, honestly. Because it doesn't matter once the postseason rolls around and you get 40 burgered by them, 50 burgered by them, and then they play each other again, and then they play each other again. And unless your school has a generational talent to push into that conversation, you're not going to get there. And here's the thing. If you run the same 5 plays all year, teams are going to be able to game plan for that. And if you don't practice passing the ball, that's also going to backfire when teams key in on the run. I think of the Ralston Valley Columbine game this year, where Ralston Valley's like, yeah, they're going to come out and they're going to run the ball. And Columbine tried passing the ball, I think, more in that game than they did all year, and it didn't work. Why? Because when you have the same amount of pass attempts in one game as you do for the entire year, what are you expect? Are you really expecting success? Are you naive? Are you, like, what is your deal? And it's been like this. It has been like this for like a decade. Where, how am I supposed to have fun watching football? I think of more modern games and whatnot, and I think of like Fairview and Chatfield. Chatfield has taken serious steps forward as far as becoming a passing, modern offense. That Fairview-Chatfield game was interesting. There is still like some I-form and stuff, but there was also spread. You know, like, you're allowed to do multiple things. You don't, I'm not telling every state to just go to an air raid offense. You know what I mean? You got to play to your personnel strengths, yada, yada, yada. But you have to be able to do multiple things. And these players are worse off for it. These coaches are worse off for it. And this state is so much worse off for it. And the crazy thing, like, they're just happy that it works. They're happy when it works. And it's like, well, yes, that's why the wing tee, like, occurred. It's a system that, you know, you can succeed with and you can dominate with, etc. But you're not, in this day and age, you're not doing yourself, your players, or the game of football a favor. I think it's actually disrespectful to football to be, especially at a school where you have a lot of kids and you have a very deep roster, to be running an offense like that instead of having, you know, different packages. Oh, you know, like, this receiver doesn't really get on the field, but we have a package where they could be a great, you know, weapon on, like, jet sweeps or double passes and tunnel screens and whatnot. But, you know, that doesn't match up with the defense that well. So we're going to go to a single back, you know, like, we have an H-back and a tight end kind of look here. And we're going to use a lot of motion to figure out if they're in manners. Like, there's so much that you can do that you just miss out on and don't respect. There's just, the lack of respect drives me insane. And it's killer. It's killer. It actually is killing football here in Colorado, and it's not allowing it to progress. All right, I got that off my chest. I want to let y'all have a chance to address the lack of modern schemes here. And then I do want to have a bounce back before we talk about the next session here, because I do think that there has been change since we called it out the first time, but it's still not enough.
Gideon, why don't you go ahead and talk about it? Because I have a lot to say, and I would rather talk about it last here. So go ahead.
Okay, so right now, I spent a little bit of time while you were talking, Kodey, pulling up the max preps for a couple of teams that I watched this year. First, I pulled up the stats for Columbine, and when we're looking at it, Columbine had 4,020 rushing yards this year, and they had 680 passing yards this year. In their first game against Mullen, they had 0 pass attempts, and they only had over 10 pass attempts twice this season. The first was the win over Arvada West, where they had 11. And then the second was the playoff loss against Ralston Valley, where they had 14. In the game where they scraped out a win over Rock Canyon, they had 2 pass attempts for 12 yards. 2 for 12 yards. I do not see how you're expecting your quarterback to develop any kind of rhythm or any type of chemistry with your receivers, who totaled 709 yards on the year. I know a guy on a 2A team that went 3-6 that had more yards than that by himself as a receiver. I don't see how you expect your quarterback to get any rhythm or any chemistry with a receiver with only having 100 plus yard passing game. And then in your last game, even when you do run, because you actually had a pretty decent amount of runs, pretty average compared to your usual, you had 47 run carries. You only have 193 yards on that. That is your season low. No run touchdowns. Nobody had over 100 yards. So what you're seeing is that Ralston Valley was able to shut Columbine down because they knew, they had 2 weeks in a row where they had 5 pass attempts, and last week they had 2 against Rock Canyon. So we know that we can put pressure on the receivers and the quarterback, stop the run game. It's going to be fine. And it was. There were 4 completions on 14 attempts. And he only got 30 yards 30 passing yards against Ralston Valley. 1 touchdown to 2 interceptions. And your longest pass was 11 yards. Let's balance that against Pooter. Pooter, as a team, was much more well-balanced. They had 1,530 rushing yards on the season and 1,870 receiving yards and about 1,800 passing yards. So, looking at it, sure, Pooter may not have the all-around talent that Columbine has, and they may not have the scheme that Columbine has that sure might be regular season effective. But if I'm being honest, I would vastly prefer having an offensive scheme that has you only lose by 2 to Fairview, who I believe had a bye, over running the exact same offense every year and losing early every year as well. Like, I don't know, it's just frustrating because it's like you see some of these schools where they have really good receivers, like 6'2", 6'3", 200, like 180, 190, 200 type of guys, where if they were on a team like Pooter, who, hell, Pooter even runs 2 tight ends at once to run that type of formation. But if you had a scheme like Fossil Ridge, or you have a scheme like Creek, who, I don't know, trusts their quarterback, then potentially, if you throw more than 2 passes in a game, you could win a couple more playoff games and maybe make it a little bit further than you have since the last time you won a championship. So personally, that's how I see it. I know that those decisions are made by a lot of people, and that's just my 2 cents. But when it comes down to it, having that dynamic element in your offense can't hurt you. It may take a year or 2 to learn if you're not a master of it yet, but I'd say it would be well worth learning if you want to gain respect on the national level.
And real quick, Simon, before you jump in here, Rock Canyon, Columbine, and the year before that, the game that Simon and I attended, I want to maybe say with Mason, Pomona, Castleview, super entertaining football. Very fun. Sounds like a great game to be at. No. The most exciting part of either of those games is in the Rock Canyon one, DeAndre Horn going off, 6 receptions for 117 yards as they try and lean on him to claw back into this game following a 17-point half by Columbine. So, DeAndre Horn with the most entertaining aspects of those games. And then for the Castleview Pomona game, the most entertaining aspects were the big pass plays, like the one right before half. Those were the only times where I was like, oh, my heart rate is changing. Because it's not changing when I'm seeing power right, power left, power right, power left, power right, power left. Interception, 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 interception. Because these quarterbacks don't practice throwing the ball because they're not trusted. And it's just, it's so annoying. It's so annoying and it's so boring. Holy cow, is it boring.
And so with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and talk about this topic here, and then we can move on here. I am going to start with a quick story here. So Gino, he's going to be somebody who's going to be joining the podcast. I guess this is our announcement of him joining here, at least on an episode. He went to Grandview, so he knows all about the Centennial League, all that stuff. He talks a lot about Grandview's mediocrity, and he does not hold back on that. Despite being an athlete at Grandview for all 4 years, and obviously having, siblings as well, and knowing other people, in that Centennial League area that we've covered and their siblings. So there you go. But Gino and I, we work football, and we basically set up for the leagues here in the city of Colorado Springs. And one day, we were chilling in our golf cart watching some kids play. They're like 4th, 3rd grade, and we got into a talk about schemes and how teams in Colorado don't pass the ball. And so I told him about the wing tee, and he's not as familiar with the wing tee. He was more of a baseball guy here. And then after that, I mean, he's more of a air raid watcher type. And so I explained the wing tee to him, and so he's like, oh, so high schools are running what these kids are running out here right now, right? What these 4th graders are running? And then right as that happened, sure enough, these kids line up in the wing tee and run a sweep, and then some little kid face planted right in front of us. And so that explains perfectly well the level of a lot of these programs, who are, by the way, 5A programs. And Kodey, I know you talk about personnel and whatnot. I'm going to bleep this out, but fuck that. Honestly, fuck that shit. You have 1,000 kids at least in your school, if not more. Figure it out. Honestly, figure it out. Go ahead and mold them into the personnel that you need. And if you can't tell me that you can't find 4 dudes who could run a route out of 1,000, over 1,000, and you can't find 1 dude out of 1,000 who could throw, what the fuck are you doing? Honestly, I'm going to try to find the bleep button for that, because I don't want to do that much editing. But honestly, the fuck are you doing? Like, are you that stupid? Like, are you really that stupid that you can't find the personnel for that? That's a bullshit excuse to me. That's really a bullshit excuse. That's like going to Texas and going to a school with like 3,000, 4,000 kids, whatever. That's what our 5A and 6A is like down there. And be like, oh, we can't find anybody to run a route. We can't find anybody who knows how to throw a quick game. Are you serious? Like, what do you mean you can't? Do it. That's it. You got to be a special level of stupid to not be able to do that. And that's where Colorado is right now, especially 5A. And for some of y'all to think you are so much better than 3A, 2A, 4A, 1A is insane to me. And on top of that, for some of y'all to have the nerve to complain about, oh, well, Cherry Creek and Valor, they're just so much better than us. How could we ever compete? Maybe the reason they always beat your ass is because you run some simple systems, and they don't need to think to beat you. They just have to be better than you, be faster than you, be stronger than you to beat you. That's it. That's all they have to do, right? Because you don't know how to space out. You don't know how to space out, a field. When it comes down to it, you're really just hoping that you make enough stops and that you are able to run out the clock with 4 or 5 minutes left in a game. That is literally your hope to beat Valor or Cherry Creek. Nothing else. Because if it comes down to you having the ball with less than 2 minutes, you could go ahead and call the game a loss, to be honest with you. If it comes down to you having the ball with less than 5 minutes even, you could really just call the game a loss against a Valor or Cherry Creek, because they know what's coming, And they really are in this mindset. If you even think about passing it, because you haven't done it all year, it's going to be a pick 6. It's going to be a touchdown regardless. And so they are preying on you. And, when you are running those simple offenses that can only run the ball, you can't pass it. You can't conserve time. You can't do any of that stuff. That's tough. That's obviously tough. And, you just can't do anything there. And I don't know how you could continue to be like, it's Valor and Creek every year when you put yourself in this position to be mediocre. Don't blame Valor and Creek. You have talent too. You got guys who are going D1 too. Maybe not as many, but you need to close that skill gap by having better coaching and better schemes. That's what football is. Not everything's going to be given to you. So maybe how about you stop complaining about that shit? Figure it out. Stop being a fucking idiot for once. Yeah, go ahead and make your point, Gideon. And then we'll move on.
And so this whole conversation made me think about something else. that I hear a lot about, which is people clowning on Far Northeast, saying that in 2021 it was a Spring League championship. Like, there was no real competition there. Have you guys looked at that playoff bracket? Like, I mean, Simon, Kodey, I know you have. If you clown on them, have you looked at that playoff bracket? Have you seen that Denver South, who's been a consistent playoff team for years, now they have Joseph Capra, but like, that was a decent team. Fort Collins, who the very next season went 9-1. They both lost in that bracket. Far Northeast won the championship in that bracket. Far Northeast was the real deal that year, but after that, they graduated out, their top 3 receivers, their leading yard getter, 240 tackles, 8.5 sacks, 5 interceptions. They would have made some noise in the playoffs regardless. They probably wouldn't have made it past Creek. But if the chips had fallen right, they may have made it to the Final Four. And that brings to mind, for people that clown on Far Northeast for that, what right do you have if you don't go to Cherry Creek or Valor to criticize them for not winning a fall championship in the past decade? Seriously, what right do you have? Because they actually won a title. Cherry Creek and Valor have the lion's share of titles in the past decade. And so, what right does anyone outside of those 2 schools have to criticize a team that actually was successful? And it kind of sounds like you're just compensating if you do that. Because, I don't know. It's hard to win against Creek and Valor, yes. But that doesn't mean that you get to clown on the few people that have actually won something. And to close it out, maybe if you can't win, I think that's a you problem.
I do want to make it clear, though. Hopefully, if there's players out there, it's obviously not your fault. You can't control your scheme, right? Just want to make that super clear. But it is time for pressure to be put on these communities and these coaching staffs to run modern systems. That's it. You want to complain about losing to Creek and Valor every year. Blame your system. Honestly. Blame your coaches. Blame the community for allowing that to continue to happen. The adults who continue to allow that to happen. It's not acceptable. It's just not. And, we talked about having fun and stuff. Yeah, it's fun to cover football. And it's fun to cover passing games, but it's also fun to win and see some differences. And the only way for teams to catch up and even be able to compete with a Valor or a Cherry Creek at this point, in my opinion, is to run more modern offenses. That's it. You have to have better coaching. That's what it comes down to. And 5A, is just lacking in that. And that's why Colorado is not relevant right now when it comes to football. Not really, and so it's just not, it's not something that we can have our big schools doing. Now, if it's a smaller school, hey, I definitely understand. That makes sense to me. But after that, it's just, I don't know. When you're a 5A school, you just can't be doing all that, especially if you're one that continues to make the playoffs. You have no excuses to me, and I don't respect you for it. So that's why when you come into our DMs talking crazy, I really want to cuss you out because I don't respect you as a person, but it is what it is. So let's go ahead and talk about this next mindset here. It's the always Cherry Creek or Valor mindset. Yes, they have won the majority of the championships the last 20 years. Has that meant teams have not come close? No, teams have come close. That's fine, right? I know Pomona stole one in the middle here and whatnot, and that's totally fine, right? That's great. But we need to talk about this because I think this mindset is something that is poisoning Colorado high school football and 5A, and it is a mindset that is carried alone by the adults in this state, I would say, and then transferred over to the children in this state who are obviously going to listen to the adults mentoring them. Isn't that right, Kodey and Gideon?
Absolutely. That's where I got it from when I was in high school. I'll admit it. That was like, it was like, oh, well, Creek or Valor, you know. Like, it was like if we make it past this round and we go to Valor, we're probably not going to win. Like, that was just the perception of being a postseason team. Like, we're competing for league, we're competing for conference, and yeah, we're competing for state. And that's what it was like at other schools in the area. That's what it was like for other people in other high schools. This is not like, everyone wants to beat them, but I don't know how much is being done to do that. And here's the crazy thing too, right? Creek and Valor both ran the ball more than they passed it, right? They are not spread it out air raid offenses, right? However, they're giving you different looks. Valor, for being a very run-heavy system, is one of the hardest systems to defend against, especially once they started to get Asher in at that shotgun position, and he was running all those read options and RPOs as I would say, a true dual threat player. It became very, very hard to defend them. And they started really kicking that into gear, I want to say, following that loss to Liberty. And what's crazy, so they lose big to Liberty at home, and then, oh my gosh, are you guys ready for this? They make adjustments and go undefeated until the state championship. They make adjustments. It's crazy. It's so insane to me that they changed something that was not working and then found a lot of success. Wild, right? And this is apparently a very foreign concept. And this is something that, I mean, look, McGatlin, coaching runs in his blood, and that's one of probably the, like that's Colorado high school football royalty, the McGatlins and their run of success, and they don't have that name without their ability to adapt. Dave Logan over at Creek and that staff, adaptability. They change when they need to. And that was more evident than ever in the state championship game when one quarterback wasn't working. And this is a crazy hard decision to make. In a state championship game, the quarterback that has gotten you there through the playoffs, having to pull him and put another quarterback in, that's wild. And they did it because they're willing to adapt. They're willing to go, this isn't working, we're doing this instead. And they give you lots of different looks. Every quarterback that they rolled out was like a different offense. Like they were just straight up chameleons. And that's why they're not, we're not saying that they're better than you because they run air raid. They're better than you because they make changes. They adapt. And that's something that you're not willing to do because you're afraid of them. You can't look within yourself or whatever. And this is to coaches. I'm talking to coaches right now that your like gelatin spine is, it's unbearable. I hate to see it. And yeah, maybe you should give kids and great athletes a reason to go to your school. You have something to prove to these young athletes to not go to Creek or Valor. That's on you. And until that happens, until you show that adaptability and you give reasons, they're not going to just make themselves up. Like Valor and Creek aren't just going to implode overnight. That's not, like, if that's what you're waiting for, that's going to be a long wait. So, and you have the talent to do it too. You just have to actually be adaptable, and you got to make changes. And otherwise you're just going to keep watching the state game from the stands or from the stream or from XYZ. And yeah, Gideon, I think that you have a great point to bring up here, so I'll pass it to you.
Well, I mean, it all kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, right? Where it's like, when, like, I watched Columbine in person this year. I watched them against Fort Collins. They're a dominant team. But when you have 2 passing attempts in a playoff game, what do you think is going to happen the next game? Other than the opposing coaches, if they're a quality staff, saying, oh, hey, they only had 2 pass attempts. let's focus on shutting down the run, which they did. And like I'm looking at the right now I'm looking at the playoff bracket from 2017, which was the last time that Creek was vulnerable. They were the 7th seed that year and lost second round to Eagle Crest. And like looking at this Pomona Eagle Crest game, let's pull up this box score. And I'm going to take a wild guess what happens here. Oh, the quarterbacks actually passed. And they both had a good run game. Like in this game, Ryan Marquez from Pomona, he had 345 passing yards. And Max Borghi had 246 rush yards. And for Eagle Crest, Jalen Mergerson had 280 pass yards. And Kenny Wanting had 210 rush yards. So it's not a have one or the other. You can have both. It just depends on making the right adjustment. And like, sure, sometimes you can get away with only having 2 pass attempts. But if you're in the playoffs and you know what team you're going up against, like it's like when we're talking about the Nuggets playoff run. A prepared team should know exactly what they're scheming against and know exactly what they're going to try to do to combat what you're doing. Like, that's just... Like, not for football, but I've been on multiple playoff teams, and that's exactly what we go over every single practice between the second the bracket's released and the second the game starts, is what are they going to do to combat exactly what they know we're going to do. And I do not see that level of adaptation in a lot of these programs. And so I'm not sure if that's the point you were referring to, Kodey, but that's what comes to mind when I look at this issue.
Yeah. I'm pretty tired, I ain't gonna lie, after my rant earlier on in this episode. Well, what's a point I could throw out there? Oh, it's a victim mindset for sure. You know, oh, it's always Cherry Creek or Valor. Cry about it, dude. Who cares? Like, honestly, who cares? You need to work with what you got, and you need to do more to compete. You know, you act like you're not in the same playoffs. You act like you haven't also won 10 games. And, you know, it sucks, dude. And, you know, I've been to a couple 5A playoff games. The number of times I hear someone be like, well, we played Cherry Creek, or, well, we play Valor next, or, well, you know, there goes our season. It ends next week. From parents in the stands is despicable. I would never do that, honestly, because I think that's weak. Why? You know, why would you be? Because I know if you're saying that in the stands, you're for sure telling your kiddo this, like, oh, it's okay, they cheat. It's okay, they're Creek or Valor, making these stupid excuses when really it's on you for losing. Let's keep it 100 there. You lose because you're not good enough, and that's it. You could talk about Valor and Creek all you want, but you're at the position you're in for a reason, and you need to find a way to get it done. You know, there's multiple paths to winning and being successful, not just the one that you keep seeing. Your issue is that you're not mentally strong enough, and I think it all comes back to being mentally strong, and I think if you have that mindset, you're just not a mentally strong person. And there's some people that are going to get really mad at that, but I honestly don't care. Like, that's no disrespect to Valor or Creek. Give them their respect. But at the end of the day, you need to trust that you can find a way to get it done. And if what you're doing is not working, then maybe be smart and grow a brain and think, well, maybe I should do something else. Because that's really what it comes down to, right? So, I don't know, dude. You know, keep complaining, keep acting mediocre and whatnot. It's not good for 5A football, but, you know, this mindset is just one of those things that's toxic for it. I'm not going to tell Valor and Creek to stop being good. No, you're the only thing that is really pushing forward football in Colorado, at least on the 5A level, in my opinion. So I'm not going to be like, oh, well, they shouldn't recruit, or there should be, you know, all these limitations put on them. No, you need a raise to their level, you know. it is bad if they have to come down to your level and play at your level, because that means the state is regressing as far as football talent goes and culture and whatnot. That cannot possibly be the future here for Colorado. So you need to elevate. That's it. That's it. And you can't make excuses and all that. You need to work harder. You need to use all your resources. You need to put pressure on your community to be like, hey, thinking this way is unacceptable. Because that ultimately, makes losing acceptable by thinking that way. That's really what it is. It's a loser's mentality. You're accepting losing and you're accepting defeat before trying. And, the only way you really do lose, it's a real cliche and whatnot, is by not trying. And that's really the first step to it, by thinking that way. We gotta play him next. Oh no, it's a playoff Valor, playoff Creek. That's such a weak mindset. Like, it is. And I don't respect, I definitely don't respect adults who have that opinion. If it comes to athletes, obviously I have a smaller level of respect for them. But, they're also kids, and when they get older, they'll figure out, oh, well, maybe I could have done a little bit more. Yeah, you could have, but also I'm not going to blame you because you were a child, and this adult misled you into thinking you were weaker than what you were. So that's definitely a weakness in Colorado football. We're never going to get past, being a flyover state if you can't get past some of the teams and being intimidated by some of these teams, because there are also squads who we know are talented but play scared when it comes to Creek and Valor. And that is also unacceptable as well. Like I said, don't blame the athletes, but that's purely on the adults for sowing that fear into their child and not letting them play at their best ability. And that's how I view it.
Hey, rightfully so. I mean, can I make one more point here before we just real quick?
No, yeah, go ahead. I'm all good on my end. I don't have any more to say, so Kodey, Gideon, feel free to make your final points here.
Well, when it comes to Creek and Valor, no other classification acts like this. Like, 1A and 2A right now both have established dynasties. It is, like, at a certain point, yeah, it is what it is. Lyman's going to be Lyman, Eaton's going to be Eaton. But I don't know a single program that just goes up to a school like Lyman or goes up to Eaton that is above 500 and says to themselves, oh, they're Lyman, oh, they're Eaton, we can't win. No, what the hell are you talking about if you think like this? Like, just because they're good doesn't mean that you can't go in there and take advantage of their weaknesses. Like, if you make the playoffs against one of these types of teams, you know the level of preparation they're going to bring to you, and you have to double it. Like, sure, it may be a 1 in 100 chance that you beat them, but you grasp every straw that you can to make sure that today is the one. You don't just sit back and let the potential last time that you ever play this game with your friends, just let it slip through your fingers. And that's what it frustrates me to no end, seeing that. Because I know people that would kill to be in your position. That would kill to be in the opportunity where they could compete against those schools. Not even win, just to be able to compete. And a lot of people are just like, it's Creek. There's nothing we can do. It is what it is. No, you go out there and you put your heart and your soul into every second, and you do the best you can. You do what you can with what the defense and the offense gives you, and you adapt. You adapt, that's the key word, to what you see them doing. Because if you don't do that, then you're dead on arrival. And so, it's frustrating to see. Hope it changes in the next couple of years.
Also, by the way, it's not like we're naive. We've been covering this thing for years now. In addition to, being around it.
And I grew up here.
Yeah. And playing.
Like, I've seen it.
Yeah, no, in addition to all that. So, we see what is happening, for sure. And this is our response to that as, like, grown adults. But, Kodey, did you have anything here as we wrap up.
I did want to specifically shout out one program in particular that I think is a part of positive change here in Colorado football, and that is Ralston Valley, who last time we did a culture, it wasn't a series, it was a culture episode. We tore into them pretty good. Ralston Valley was one of our top targets because at the time they were running a wing T offense and they were making it to like the quarters every year. This year, huge shout out to the administration who brought on Jared Yanacito, one of the best coaches in the state, in my opinion. And in their first year, running a more balanced system and one that throws the ball with better pass concepts, they made semis and lost to Valor by a single point. And I bet my bottom dollar that in a rematch between Ralston and Creek from week 1, that also would have been a very exciting game. I still think Creek probably goes home with a trophy. Because Valor battled them hard, and Creek still came out on top. But Ralston Valley, be more like Ralston Valley, other programs. Be more like Ralston Valley, who adapted their game. They adapted to their opponents. They challenged themselves. They had one of, if not the hardest schedule between, like I said, Creek to open. They had an out-of-state game. Their non-league games were Grandview, Regis, and Valor. They scheduled 4 teams in the state that were all in the top 10 for all of their non-league games. And then in their league, they play in a pretty solid league, I would say. Not as strong as it has been in the past, I don't think, but they play in a solid league. And they challenge themselves and they push themselves. And they, in the long term, are going to be way better off for it. These athletes are going to be way better off for it. There's going to be more opportunities for athletes as Yanacito builds a name and brand here at Ralston Valley. That is the kind of change that we need. And that needs to be beckoned on by the parents in the community. That needs to be brought up, to coach, and I'm not saying in Ralston Valley's community. This change didn't just happen. The guy who was there since Ralston Valley was, a football program into school, and he had an exodus to Frederick, and that has to come at the demands of a lot of people, I would think. That comes at either admin listening in or parents listening in and demanding better for themselves, their community, and their children. And I think that's exactly what they're getting from it. By making those demands. And other communities that are listening, you have to do that. Because these coaches in 5A, they're complacent, bro. They are mad complacent.
They think they're safe.
Yeah. And unless you let them know that they're not, they're going to continue to assume so. So it is up to community members, media, coaches, if you're willing to make a change, to make this change. But parents, honestly, a lot of, boosters or quarterback clubs or whatnot, and administration, it's putting pressure on them. It's putting pressure on admin and coaches to not be happy with a quarterfinals run year after year after year, especially if you have the talent to push those other teams. So there's been slight progress, especially at a school that I thought, especially after that episode, was going to be stuck in their ways forever. But now I can comfortably say if you are a wide receiver over in that Western Littleton area or in that Arvada area, I'd go to Ralston. I would go to Ralston over Pomona, Columbine. A-West is good too.
They're building a good program, rebuilding a good program over there.
Yeah. And you're going to be way better off for it. And the state's going to be way better off for it. And I guess that's my closing remarks is we have witnessed change since we have started this podcast and we've started to push this envelope. And you got to push for it. But it can happen. So please take action and do better. And ask that everyone at that school, program, and community does better for your athlete. I have nothing else to add on, Simon.
Okay, so I do want to add one more part here at the end. This is like post-recording, so it's just going to be me on this one here. But basically, I want to shout out some other programs who are doing a really good job. I want to shout out Fairview. I know they've kind of struggled with having two different quarterbacks the last 2 years, but they've still been really successful. And, when talking with guys from Valor or Creek, they talk about Fairview in high regard. This is going back years ago, but when I interviewed Chase Penry, he even said, look, Fairview was probably the toughest team we played. They really gave us a run for our money, and he had so much respect when talking about them. And like I said, so many other players have praised them as well, and it's because of their scheme and how tough they are. So I wanted to make sure we give Fairview a lot of love here, because I feel like they're truly one of the teams that are doing well. Fossil Ridge, love their system. I think they're doing great as far as systems go. They could improve a couple things, like, adding more travel games, as in like out-of-state games. But absolutely love what they are doing there. And then obviously, Arvada West, I mentioned them briefly, but they run a similar system. I really feel like they get the most out of their players out there as well. And then last but not least, I do want to, say this just one more time here. Cherry Creek and Valor, I don't think it is on them for 5A mediocrity. I think they're great. Continue getting better, doing your thing. If you're an athlete from there or a coach from there, hey, we respect y'all a lot. I think what our relations are at this point here, especially Valor. I'm so proud of how they've come. I really respect McGatlin over there, Brett McGatlin, and I think they're going to be really, really good and be good for Colorado high school football as a whole. I really believe that. And then Dave Logan at Cherry Creek, the living legend himself. We've had a few conversations, and, he's always been a great guy, but, you got to respect how, prestigious he is and how much he has won. I know some people want to take away from his greatness, but you got to appreciate that. And so, for those couple programs to be doing well, that's great. We need more major programs to continue to step up to the plate and continue to evolve here. 5A needs to be better, plain and simple. And I think if you follow the path of a Ralston Valley, of Fairview, of Arvada West, of a Cherry Creek Valor, you'll be just fine. And so there you go there. Just wanted to make sure I added this part in here. I'm just going to say this. For Colorado high school football to be great and to be taken seriously, our highest classification needs to be up to par. And that's it. Can't just be Creek and Valor. You have to have at least 15 to 20 schools, I would say, that are up to par. And I think outside of Creek and Valor and, a handful of other programs, I would say at least 80% of the schools in 5A are way below par. Way below. So, there you go there. But thank you so much for rocking with us and listening to us. This was a little bit of a shorter episode, which is good. But, we talked a lot on our previous episode where we talked about higher classification bias. So make sure you check that out, along with our other episodes. Anywhere you can listen to podcasts, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube as well, at Playmakers Corner. Go ahead and give us a good rating there. And then follow us on social media, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Already know the DMs are going to be full, and I'm already looking forward to deleting most of them, because I'm not even going to read some of those that come to us sideways, because who cares? Be mediocre if you want. So there you go there. But, show us some love there and be ready for more episodes. We'll be starting our season previews here soon. And I have been one of your co-hosts, Simon Voyanos, a.k.a. Coach V.
I am looking forward to the DMs of the real ones that are going to be laughing at these other programs with us, though. As we, have some joy at their expense. But I have been another co-host, Kodey Stoffer.
And I've been your final co-host, Gideon Agner.
Peace. Peace.
Bye.